All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to Beyond Royal Political Arts Center. My name is Ivan Salinas, and I'm the program's coordinator. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with our space, we're a nonprofit literary arts organization founded in 1968 by George Stuart Smith. The project that began as an experimental literary magazine and evolved into the interdisciplinary art space it is today. Since 1978, the organization has taken residence here in the original Venice City Hall building. We're a place dedicated to the possibilities of language, providing a platform for readings, writing workshops, and gallery exhibitions year-round. I'd like to acknowledge our presence on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Carolina Tonga peoples. We acknowledge the wrong done to indigenous peoples through colonialism and genocidal practices. And as an arts organization, we're committed to uplifting their communities. I invite you to take a look at our lineup of programs coming up this spring. Some very exciting things are happening, not just tonight's reading, but we have a few programs with poetry and jazz, book launches, and even film screenings in celebration of National Poetry Month. Next week, we'll be hosting Mark Irwin and Elena Karina Byrne, who's in the audience. This is happening next Friday. They'll be reading from their new poetry collections. And on Saturday, we're also hosting Poetry in Non-English, a poetic response in decentralizing English as the only language that matters. This was a reading curated by poet Rita Estel and authors Obed Silva, J. Harris, Niki de la Rosa, and a few more will be taking on the stage. And later that evening, we'll be hosting a book launch of Carol B. Davis's new collection titled Below Zero. In April, we'll be hosting the recently appointed California poet laureate Lee Herrick. He'll be coming down from Fresno, and we'll be joined by SoCal poets Seth Ellis Brown, Emilio Matsu, and Michelle Burton Rosado. So please check out our calendar and all the exciting things that we have coming up. We're also offering some free and intensive workshops online and in person. Big thank you to our staff who made this event possible. Our tech director here with Eric Alberg, and our executive director Quentin Ring, Jimmy Vega, assistant director, and of course our program's intern Genesis Perez, who you can say hi to in the bookstore. And that's where you also find copies of our authors' books tonight, which I 100% recommend, all three of them. We have copies of their newest books and a few more. So, just having read a few of their poems and from each of their books, I'm really excited to, and honored to be hosting tonight's reading. And I think I just want to start right away with the readings. Hope everybody is also excited. I think we'll begin with a poet that is so important to our community, and it's an honor to be introducing the poet tonight who will be opening the reading. This is a poet that I came that recently I knew of, and it's all thanks to this reading. So it's really an honor to welcome first Martha. You'll find copies of her newest book, The Place One Is, published by Omnidon Press. And there's at least one poem in there that you know about that it's a request from me, and it's the title. It's the poem titled Flight. So if you want to read from Earth and Sky section or just that poem, that'd be great. But no, that's totally fine. I don't mind that. But it'll be delightful to hear any of your poems, really. So without further ado, Martha Ronk has, I was going to share her bio a little bit, and that's okay. Martha Ronk has published 13 books of poetry. Most recently, The Place One Is, and also The Myth of Ariadne on the Chirico's paintings. Transfer of Qualities was longlisted for the National Poetry Award. Vertigo was a National Poetry Series selection. Glass Grapes Short Stories was published by BOA Editions. And her ironic memoir, Pleasures of the Table by Green Integer. Her work has been included in several anthologies, including the Wesleyan anthology, American Poets in the 21st Century. Please welcome Martha Ronk.
I want to thank you for that lovely introduction, and it's such a pleasure to be back at Beyond Baroque. I haven't been for a while, as we've all been shut up and not seeing anyone or the places that we're accustomed to being. And it's a great pleasure to read from this book. It's clearly about places and the way in which we identify with places and are made by places that we love and return to. It's a book that's divided into half. The second half is more about LA and their, the second half is about Los Angeles. And I'm going to read mostly from the first half. I tried to figure out how to go back and forth, and I decided I would just start at the beginning and read the poems. Most of them were written while I was staying on Humboldt Bay, which is in very northern California, and where there are a number of beautiful birds and wonderful walks, and where they worry about too much water, and I guess we now get to worry about that too. The first part has a quotation, each detachable makes up this country I'm pointed into. To let go. Imprecise morning, as if limbs were only loosely threaded in the coming and going of tides, in flattened grassland extending into beach sand, going on until far out of view. The imprint of a foot, then another, the time it takes for a seeded oyster basket to mature. I think of visiting the morning while I'm at it. Keep saying, I am here. And she writes back from the other coast, we will die where we are, here or there. Hours once rung by bells. She tells me we need to give over to place time. The beaches with bleaching logs, so many of them, as if she were telling me something I can never not think it means something hidden from view, and wonder then if every detail, even if distance blurs it, opens to the beating of wings going off over the flatland and disappearing into migratory patterns, as if in the near future all objects would simply let go all intensity. Touching. To muse. Locate the fringes of steady on. To put a hand out to touch solace, the foot of the bed at night, inching around it, stepping in wet and yellow foam, washing up the smell of rot. A girl at the shallow's edge, bending to touch it. A sudden opening underfoot, where waters warm the concrete jetty. Coming to an understanding, both of them hope it is so. It is unsure, although they continue to touch, moving in and out of rooms. No putting off the way time manifests age. Painted in the muted colors of accoutrements and darkness, hands folded in that certain way, thumbs forming in a circle. At the edge of the myrtles, by the water, a neglected midden. Once you know, It feels like the ground one oughtn't step on. And I should have said what a midden is in case people don't know. It's on the property that's right up against the bay. And then in all the property actually that's around Humboldt Bay, there are collections of shells that have accumulated over time as the Wiyot Indians rode around in the bay and stopped at various places to shell and eat and leave the shells behind. And I just found them extraordinary, that sense that you could touch history, that you could walk out and have a sense of feeling as if you were in the past. Another country. The it, and with it, shifts and pivots as a compass needle, vetch, clover, brackish seaweed in heaped up smells, bits of pulverized shell, skeletal casings underfoot, fog banks stoked by fires in the Central Valley, scrims cover what yesterday stood as branched trees, a house barely visible, more memory than memory, unheimlich, as if it had been or could have been. You whom I turn to in the near sleep, stumbling over ourselves, whose arms and legs was it I thought you called, extracting the changed angle between two norths? A skeleton of rusted car seams laid out on the beach, each step unlinked from the one before. Each detachable makes up this country I'm pointed into. The next section is called Pulled into Earth, Air, Sky, as if the various places that surround you sort of are magnetic and pull you into them, where one is. The place one is the place that is one, nowhere else. And although I can think myself back into some places, where one is the only place, and everyone's feet change underfoot as wet, sand, concrete, pebbles, and smooth operate as adjustments on the particular tree out the window, one branch hanging down. Oh, Robert Adams, I do think of your black and white photos, but it's a cypress hanging down outside the window and sending out fingers of that certain green, not the various gray you do so well. Since one can't be otherwise than an equation of such enormously specific greens, and one cannot be otherwise than where one is knit into it beyond window glass, a fusion with a wind-shaped tree. In the sky. And this has a little quotation at the end about Leonardo. Leonardo envisioned a device to be built of wood, reeds, and taffeta. A small model can be made of paper with a spring-like metal shaft that after having been released, after having been twisted, causes the screw to spin up into the air. In the sky. In the sky would be, as others have recognized, a highly improbable move. Yet no doubt all humans have dreamed such, just as their sounds and cries call it up, the gliding side-swoop raptors mostly, but in the twilight, the swallows take to the abundant flying insects as if nothing else had ever existed. And that swarm near the edge of Peninsula Road is one place to be on this peninsula, not so different from any others. These birds, no words can get hold of, no adjectives, fonts, metaphors. How could even an ode praise one of them enough? even out of the sky, as an egret lifts one leg, then another, in slow progress in the shallows, undulating white against gray. Language fails bird moving along, as if water were an element to be disdained. 3, dream walking. And this also has a quotation at the end. The commons is a new way to express a very old idea, that some forms of wealth belong to all of us, and that these community resources must be actively protected and managed for the good of us all. Dream walking. Walking smoothly is a place in the unconscious as one is nightly, with a field laid out in unearthly ochre as far as the eye can see. It is an occurrence within the frame of lifting out of what we call day, intruding even in the space called night. One needs to keep walking until such activities are behind, to the side, dismissed as never mind, and get to where one is walking smoothly and without thinking, without effort such as tends to restrict movement, before the frame opens up the yellow-green commons, conducive to walking smoothly without props or artificial aids, attaining an easy gait, leaving behind all social hierarchy, tyranny, corruption, greed, walking outside the border of consciousness, all bewilderment gone from a body, only there occurring and not occurring in the same space, and for a time being the very time within which one is walking. And this is the poem called Flight, number 4. In the seaweed strewn across the tide line, the least sandpipers settle to feed, until suddenly they're off in a great wave, minuscule flecks of light switching on and off, lifting up, a Mobius strip, twisting away into nothing, and back again at great speed, until at a spot recognized by some mechanism humans lack, they touch down momentarily, before sweeping off again in a line of white hallucinations you can't keep up with, can't see how they don't knock one another out of the air, given such urgency. And immobile as you are, you're caught up in the blinding cloud of indistinguishable birds, unable to pull away, unable to do anything but give in, as if some substance for which you have no name enabled adherence to the streak of light, the flip of their wings releases at the top line of water like a large fish about to breach the surface. And then I want to read a poem that's about a place where there's a wonderful hiking trail, and it's called Malel, a tribal name, a Wiyot tribal name. The property comprises wetland and associated uplands, including dunes and maritime forest within a barrier island ecosystem, and includes habitat for the endangered Menzies wallflower and beach leia, as well as rare dune mat plant communities. There are no trees on the beach. It goes on, and the water's so cold no one swims, and on Malel the trees are being swamped by giant dunes migrating over them as wind blows grains of sand into the air. and they hang there until they're over the top and falling on ragged limbs and ragged tree hair, smothering the tree until each tree kneels into the sand. And over the years, the slump of the dunes alters the landscape. The movingness of the world is right with us on this trail, moving country into country, one history wiping out another, upending a familiar world, shifting and moving over cities, lives, shoulders too weighted down to think with, no matter how little or much one knows. Shifting sand moves over trees, fills up ponds and lagoons, chokes a night with images of future migrations extending into where we are walking. And then I thought I'd read another piece that has to do with the changing landscape, and that has to do with climate change. And this is called Into Rising Waters. It has to do with the way that the ocean is rising, obviously, and is about to swamp various communities and places where right now the cows are grazing, since the land was originally reclaimed for agriculture. Into Rising Waters. Under the various moons, various translations thereof, so many vacant lots, matilla poppies, trash and abandonment, thistles, rusty blackberries, coyote brush, tires, see-through pale flax, clumps of fog heave back and forth as if they were mammalian, labial creatures, pulsing earthward, then into cloud-shorn skies, each iteration a different tidal moon torn into papery scraps. Refracted light burns my eyes, a cramped muscle turns the street lamp blue. Under the rubbery step, the gravel gives way. Restless wheat stalks, akin to what muttering is like under her breath, in another room, talking to herself. Thin and high-pitched, underpinning whole fields of words, a lens of fresh water floats on the heavier salt water under that. If you push the weeds, a marker stands where the winter tide was high. Rising seawater will swamp nearby towns, the bridge, the Mad River Slough, the low-lying field where the cows lie and stand, the graffiti-covered barn. And I'm going to close with a poem that's also based on Robert Adams' photograph. I should have said before that one of my favorite photographers of California and the West is Robert Adams, and he takes gorgeous pictures of trees that are, I think, to many people not beautiful, mainly because he frames them so oddly. A branch comes off at right angles and just enters the frame. Anyway, this is called Night, a photograph by Robert Adams. And Robert Adams actually did a whole book about night photographs that I looked online to buy, and it now costs something like $300, and I think, you know, what in the world happened? Anyway, this is called Night. Ordinary bits of light on neighborhood leaves, trees passed by, splattered not very wide on a random number of them. The canopy of leaves wide enough to hold multiple bits of light. And what I can't help is how pulled I am into the light, as if my eyes could focus on multiple places at once, which I know they can't. And yet my body, flattened and splayed, spreads itself over the leaves, and the branch never lowers or moves, simply stays as it is, as I am pulled from each limb and finger, head, and elbow onto the tree, as if I could just lie there, elongating out to the extreme endpoints, not in my neighborhood, but in his Longmont neighborhood in 1976, when at that time I was nowhere near, and yet the online photo allows me to move entirely into a night and lights scattered, I suppose, from an ordinary street lamp on the sidewalk, and the tree branches, and it must be summer, given so many leaves. Thank you so much for coming.
Another round of applause for me. Good to have you back in the space, and an honor to present your reading, and thank you so much for taking my next up, I'd like to welcome a long-distance friend who made during the pandemic, thanks to another professor at Cal State Northridge. I started working here at Beyond Baroque as a fellow in poetry and communications, and one of the first virtual events I've gone was a retrospective reading for Chicano avant-garde poet Alexandra Jade, and it was all thanks to David Lloyd, who edited the collection of Chicano, a collection of Alexandra Jade's readings and writings. And my paintings. Throughout the span of his career, Alfred wrote several poetry collections, and they're all compiled, or at least selected poems are collected here, and it was published by the Wesleyan University Press. But I just wanted to thank you once again for having, for allowing for that opportunity to happen, and it was great to see Luis J. Rodriguez, Sherry Moraga, Juan Felipe Herrera, Harry Gamboa, and just remembering one of their closest friends. And really glad that the writings of Alfred are alive, and that I got to know him, at least through his words, thanks to you. So tonight, though, it's about your writing. It's about celebrating the collection of the harm fields. The collection opens with some prose pieces, and then followed by more short pieces, but which are definitely beautiful, and looking forward to hearing from them. So just wanted to give a brief background on Irish honorary Chicano friend. David Lloyd is a poet, playwright, and critic. Among his many publications are Arc and Silk, poems from 1979 to 2009, and The Harm Fields. A chapbook, Terra Terra, appeared with Maverick Books in May 2022, and other recent work is Firmament. Displayed in the press, Le Placard, is available in a bilingual edition from Presses Universitaires du Midi, as the French would say. He is also the editor of Alfred Jade's Chicano collected poems, and his most recent critical book is Counterpoetics of Modernity, on Irish poetry and modernism. Please welcome David Lloyd.
Thank you, Ivan. It's true, the last event I did with Beyond Baroque was thanks to you, and I'm so grateful to you for giving a way to commemorate our old friend Alfred Arteaga, who was just such a tremendous poet. In fact, maybe the last time I read Beyond Baroque was actually with Alfred, and I remember the terror of staring to a room which, unlike today, was completely dark. You couldn't see anything. There could be nobody, there could be 2 people, 3 people. So with that in mind, it's a little odd today to be reading, knowing that there may or may not be people tuning in from across the universe. So anyway, if there are, shout out to you too.
I'm watching.
You nine, thank you for being there. So I actually wanted to begin with a pair of elegies that I wrote for Alfred in the course of or after editing Chican Cuicato. The first one, I try to emulate a little Alfred's own practice, which he cultivated throughout his writing career, of mixing languages and crossing languages in the same poem and even in the same line, and playing on the overlaps between the sounds of Spanish, the sounds of French, the sounds of German, and of course also Nahuatl. The first poem tries to do something like that. I'm not sure if I can do it justice, but I'll try. The second, according to his daughters, the day that Alfred passed away, he saw a hummingbird, and he said, "This is good fortune." He loved hummingbirds and has several poems about hummingbirds. So I'll be picking up from Martha's beautiful poems about birds with the second poem called Colibri, which is the Spanish for hummingbird. Poeta, Chicano, Cantador, Namer. Red net. El poeta da de nada, dona immobile de sein, sein Dasein. Sein gives this sign de estar, star, still, a stare, in the dark spark of his eye, in Suret, strands extended, still, con lengua llama, red to sable, incandescent sands, cinders, burning still, plumes in the breeze. Sea, the still sea below, still there, da, ictus, flow, sea. Colibri. Sea breeze speak low through the dun grasses of Pescadero, and I should say, I'm sorry, that Pescadero is the small town south of Half Moon Bay and the Highway 1 up north, where Alfred is buried in a very small little churchyard overlooking the Pacific. Sea breeze speak low through the dun grasses of Pescadero, dry grasses on the slope, rustling over Pescadero. Death was a foreign language. No one's tongue got around it. Dental caliper clenched round your thickening tongue. Glottal stopped. Measure and beat stopped. Too soon. Angry burr descends out of nothing. Dry lightning flash iridescent breast in the stem. Liquid language fills your throat. Calyx raised to the bird's thrum. This greedy bird swells in your upturned mouth. Measure and beat of the wing, this unforgetting. Salt breezes speak low through the rustling grasses over Pescadero. Music of grasses and breeze. Trust your unmuted arms, palms spread into an offshore wind, taking flight over this new arena. White sand, blown over dark sand, down low below Pescadero. Lift the amaryllis throat to the hummingbird. Its uncoiled tongue blooms liquid in your dry mouth, vibrant in the salty grasses over Pescadero. The breezes tang this song. I tend to write sequences rather than individual occasional poems. Sometimes makes it hard to choose what to read. But tonight I thought I would read from the Harmfields what's really its central sequence, a sequence called Codolith. I chose to read it at the risk of getting too elegiac in tone tonight, because the poem is dedicated to the Irish poet Maurice Scully, one of the finest poets who had been writing in Ireland until 2 weeks ago when he died suddenly in Spain. It's dedicated to him because I had a bundle of notes towards the poem, but I had no idea what to do with them. They were kind of fragmenting all over the place, and I couldn't find what a form would be for them. And unusually for me, I had a dream. And in the dream, I was taking Morris's poems, and he writes in a way where the poem runs over pages and pages and is scattered all over the white space. And I concentrated these poems into the middle of the page, into like a postage stamp sized poem. And when I woke up, I knew what I had to do. So the poem begins with an epigraph from Morris's amazing long book called Livelihood. Codolith was a process for doing lithography that was very rapidly displaced once Photoshop arrived. It involves stripping a photographic negative with very high contrast film onto a lithostone and then printing from that. And of course it was used a lot in poster making in the 1980s. All those rock posters were probably done via Codolith printing. And the name, I had a friend who was doing Codolith back in the day, and the name always suggested to me light writing in stone. And moving to this country from Ireland, and particularly then moving down south, it took me a little while to get to learn how to love the desert landscape and the chaparral landscapes and all the exposed rock, and to feel the way the warmth at the end of the day still lingers in the rocks as if they were alive. And I started thinking, what would it be to inhabit rock, to be in the center of rock? And I suddenly realized, well, of course, there are people who live in rock. There are people who live in black sites themselves for most of their lives. So the poem mingles a celebration of that landscape that I've learned to love with the bitter reality of how people are living. And I think that's probably enough. Codolith. Where to? Said a voice, then the voice went away, by which, as if time and a sea in a dark mood over the rocks, where there are no rocks, finishes you. Maurice Scully, Livelihood. Fields. So livid a gleam along the rim. White winds descended from the shattering fields. Runnels groove the mantle. The folded slab breaks down the gradient. Numbed in the song they sing, lay down the possibilities. Flesh knits its meshes into the grain of the stone. Dry wash. Dead wind off the Fang Range. Strange weather, strange witness in the teeth of it. Bits and grit in the fantail. Did you think we would leave and not leave bone in the downdrift? Grading, silting, stone angel, sweeping the wash with your wing. Petroglyph. Skin burrs, the thumbs impress the fibers, finding the grain of the stone. Such transfer, the light writing turned ghost flesh, mapped in stone. Did we remember the gifted one, the four staves of its opening? Nothing is given. It gives and is gone. Face. What the rock face imposes. My skin imprinted with its warm relief, sugar lift pock marks. Open the stone book. Light etches its ridges. The furrow archive sanded away. Scar tissue stares into the tender slate. Mantle. Rock breaks the living. The living wrap stone with all their new brutalities. Root, blast, frack. In the breaker's yard, bodies bend in the wind. We rattle their bones in the crown of a hat. We raffle the mantle. It shears like a sea on the shore of the living. Spine. Januarized runnels bear down, open back into this thing they carry forward, acrid taste of burnt treacle or some other unworldly afterglow. Failed wings at the shoulder shrug pain to the floor. It slips down from the spine. Easy. Easy on. Casket. Hurt leads into another's rib, another beat. A casket sealed into the cleft for future incubation. Lidless eye turned into the handprint, fixed in sand. Night compact, pressed in the socket. Think it a fold, a wrinkle, graved in the skin. Salt. Salt ventures underfoot. A thread trodden back into the slab. Dull savor to the tongue, reminding a plain wind dresses the stone. Histories scored into its face. It stands out in the dark room, white remnant of the promised flight. What you do give to be of. Vitruvian, ridiculous, braced in the crevice, the aperture shrinks your horizon. Black marble curtains for you. Quartered in stone, water drawn, packed into with light piers. The white bits ciphered across the slab, percussed, strung. Prison. A thing breaks beyond naming. In the grit depot, in the shingle archive, blood meets with its congealing. Your debrided palm greets the horizon, sky prism shredding the light face, late into the farness, into the violet wash over fracture and fold. Copestone. The coping weighs on his shoulder. Turn at a stroke to the eyeball welled up with minding. What if the thing should sing then, sing out from the north rim, spelling with numbers, a jabber flush to the finish? Your history drapes sweep the place of its leanings. Chamber. Some pause and then resume. Erratic rock, adrift on the mantle. What are you doing here? Stone chamber, voided with stone. The burden bears down on the bone. Shin ache, joints skew. Come dance with me into the black sights. Come sing with me into the dry dark, into the wind's teeth. Ad lib, ad lib, ad lib. I thought I'd end by reading a new sequence. It's called Archipelagos, spelled with an E, Archipelagos. And it's dedicated to really all the people that our wars have displaced across the Mediterranean in particular, but of course not only across the Mediterranean, also across the Rio Grande. The poem has a little epigraph from the German poet Ingeborg Bachmann, a short sequence of lyrics she wrote called Songs in Flight. And my rough translation in English is, the white rescuers, the ships, oh lonely sailor, point before they sink back to the land. archipelagos. It sheared past this violent love, catch, cloud, scud, sheer, kelp. For those who live seawards, fading in mist and season, translucent adults of anemone. Eventide, edge to edge, flat grey, lake sea light laid on the water, under the black flock, homing, long necks, stretched, urge north, resting low, the unmoved waters, breath width of air, between wing scribbles on the surface, given black on grey, this fleeting echo of flight, or interval for a beat. I stepped into the blue corridor, framed in voices, zero mirror, approaching footfalls, step and breath only, unspeaking, unsaying, unpicking the tether there, untied knots, some door bored with an eye drill, the strait you must pass through, this mirror in which you are cast among islands you break into. Flight flares across the drought scene, drone vectors, circles the red route map around the receding watermark, the friable soil fractures, spalling, the ties fray, hope abandoned in the unslaked mouth. Flight careens from the impasse, the dread spark across the gap, cast off, scattered. Now the tethered boards pull away in the surges, parting, a sickening swell heaves at the hull. Ahoy! Afar, all rising to the red shred, aloft to the light point, unutterable password, salted on their cracked lips. Days adrift through the slant light, ever off-beam, off-beat, askew, night eyes lifted to constellations, the crowded gunwale thwarting, towed in among the clattering sheets, breeze plucked along the mast bars. Ragged flag shreds, bow, stove in, salt crushed to a terror signature to come. Vapor afloat, adrift on the waters, mouth to hand, maybe yours, this cursive script bleeds out. The sky's hem, dropping down to the far edge of the reach, raveled, receding, always behind, before each word set down the limiting waves of oncoming surge, white on blue, white to new on darker blue. No one in this 360 view, but I felt the presence of thousands, voices on the waves, human voices in the wake, drowned, raft, constellation of flotsam, or zodiac flexing on the swell across this reach, towards the stone strand, boulder-strewn rock, edged, and the hospitable hands held out across the broken animus line, inimical meridian. A word, just one, reached out to hand. Gull ululation crosses the sea's caesura. You caught at it with your vacant gaze, given back across the gap, stretching the shores apart, your nail tapping on a glass rim, sounding its bell. The waves' uneven pulse, sea souls, breaks beating over the ledge. Far out, a wreck knocked sidelong breaches the gulf. Their obscure numbers the sea keeps, log, salt steeped, tide fingers turning its leaves. A flame vestige signals over the reach, glance back to the late star fading into the light. The waning wake recedes, bearing away in a wide arc all its breaking songs. The keel grates on shingle, bereft of expectations. It was being orphaned again. It was as if I mounted a ridge and there was no one at beyond, nothing but the moving air and the broad land on to the river's edge. Never again the umber hill, the stone lintel, the sky blue door. The voice falls short, dragged in undertow. Make way along the glacis, laid open, exposed, wave slope upwards to the curl, the collapse, the subsidence, stranded on this long arc of unbelonging. Vitreous faces fuse in the glassy swell. Just so, a body hangs in the fissure, ice fixed, eyes face forward, dragged in the ice wake, gravel scoured, as if a finger etched its say-so in the rock wall. Just so, my visage, held in the rear view, blown backwards. All this torn offness, how do we keep going on from the tide mark, from the shelf, off the spine? Wipe down the salt-drenched sheets with your ragwick, fire burns through, a hot slash forged on the brow, scar issue rearing behind you. Drawn to this landfold, receding, descending, stairwise under the swell. What little left for you of what you left? All this unbearing, the parting waves, a throatful of air stopped in the glass. The flock veers off northwards out of the dry land, attuned to the fugue lines. Wingtips dip low to sip the flow in passing. No word in the dry mouth, the scorched air. An ember flares up in the hot draught at your lip. Not a drop to drink. Walk to the wall, to the wind-twanged wires. The keeper stares through his lidless eye, unsleeping under the branch. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks so much, Dave, for sharing new pieces from Hornfields and new pieces that you shared as well. We have Hornfields and chapbook Terra Terra, and as well as the Chicken Copy collected poems. To end tonight's reading, all the way from Phoenix, Arizona, will be featuring David Wu. David Wu's collection, The On Fire, was published in 2021. David is the author of two books, The On Fire, selected by the book club of the Washington Post as one of the best poetry books of 2021, and The Eclipses, winner of the Dave Pullen Jr. Poetry Prize. His poetry and criticism have appeared in The New Yorker, the Poetry Foundation's Harriet Books, The New Republic, the Three Penny Review, and elsewhere. He was recently elected to the board of the National Book Critics Circle. He lives in Phoenix. Please welcome David Wu.
Thank you. Thank you, Yvonne, and thank you to Beyond Baruch for this beautiful venue. It's just gorgeous. I wish we could transplant this into an area close to where I live. It's just absolutely wonderful. Thank you, David, for thinking of me and for inviting me here. And thank you, Martha, for such beautiful. We were driving in from Phoenix, and I used to live in California, although probably in the wrong part of California, northern part. And I used to drive from there to Phoenix a lot. And I've never seen Southern California look so beautiful. It was absolutely gorgeous after all the rains, with snow and the green hills and so forth. And my thoughts actually turned towards apocalypse. The Annisburg River, what Martha was talking about with the cows grazing in the salt water. Fires just 2 years ago that turned skies into a Munchian red, like a painting by Edwin Munch. And where I live, it's drought and the Colorado River emptying out, no one having enough water, and yet people are still watering their lawns. It's frightening. And I haven't even mentioned nationwide threats in other fields of culture and politics. Here's one of the two title poems from my book, Divine Fire. South Cheyenne is a messianic figure from Zoroastrianism, probably the earliest messianic figure from, I believe, 3000 to 2000 BCE. Divine Fire. No more apocalypses. The fanatics never cry. Extinction is bliss for those who resent human life. How else to be happy with a call of anger when a call of anger occludes the prospect of your faith? Better to enfranchise corruption, defile the good land, pray the rapture saves your grandchildren before the tipping globe melts. That ancient image you worshipped, now haloed, now scimitarred, will strain through time's wasted birth canal, extruding some modish thing, spiteful, vain, frontotemporally deranged. Tell yourself he is the man. Rejoice as he pries the world apart. This is the end, you'll surmise. The end of dalliance, of amity, the last gasp of a flatus of consequent sorrow. Watch as he sighs the last wheat, which flies like the severed heads of infidels. Then why is the bread we break savor of no body, but the embodied ghosts of ancient grass? What infinity lives in the turning leaves but a vaulted vision of our bonhomie? What life basks at this homely fire but sees South Cheyenne's flame? The embers will hold an American absence, ashes that leave no mark of Ronk or Enso on him who frees critical mass from a nuclear drought. The last cloud will rain fire on flesh that chars to faithless marrow. Even now, the soul is fugitive. I'd like to read a poem from my first book, The Eclipses, which was haunted by the death of my mother and the decline of my father in old age. Like David was reading a poem that felt elegiacal, and I think I'll do the same thing, partially because my dog Walter, who was 14 years old, passed away 2 days ago, and I had him for over 13 years. It was funny, we were in the car, my partner and I, and we were discussing what the vet said about Walter. He's trying to pay compliment to him after he died, and he said, I heard him say that Walter was a diplomat. And my partner said that the vet said that he was a politician. And I'm secretly hoping it's a diplomat, a politician. But anyway, this is inspired by an exquisite poem by Hugo von Hofmannsthal called Ballade des Äußeren Lebens, Ballad of the Outer Life. It's called Ballad of Infinite Forgetfulness. And strangers will arrive as they'll depart, shaking your hand. And friends will say sorry and walk right through you. And thought will slip through a sieve, honeyed with sadness. and lovers will spin in the windows of the sink foil, and minutes will stream like corpuscles through the streets until they're caught in a frontage road labeled no outlet. And dogs will listen for a master who will never return, for a garage door to rise at the touch of a remote control, for the latch to unlock and the presence of a god to enter in. And a god will throw down a fog that clarifies, not obscures. And leaves will grow clear and have no need to fall, and a root sphere will pulse in clear ground like a mind. And your father will grow senile and fretful, and your mother will lose the strength to lift beside her hand, and the grave digger will send a bill marked past due. So why the outrage? Why the dread? If the funeral is dark as you willed it to be, and the stained glass luminous with temporary light, why not rest here in the nave, where the living will pass by and murmur how rich your life was, after all, in the end? Say, I am poor. Show them the invisible patches in your black suit. Ask them to praise your forgetfulness and make it last. I'd like to read a love poem, and since I wasn't in love at the time, I consider it a premonitory love poem, a prophetic love poem, about a time like now, post-dating, well, in my milieu, post-dating apps, post-Grindr, post-Scruff, where the future arrives in the form of a hand in the small of your back from the person who is clearing away the fallen leaves of your life. It's called refusing to be on the make. If I had turned around at the right time and seen what was behind me, I would know what my actions meant. That everything served the same cause and was known to serve the same cause, as if I were transparent and could see motives flowing through me, like a picture frame held over a trout-filled stream. Now I must go on walking and walking along these blind paths where dreams no longer exist, because the self itself has gone clear. On the bridge in autumn, leaves are falling from trees I can no longer see. Lovers are holding hands that carry invisible photo albums of the families they will never have. But I am walking on for once without questioning what lies behind. As for the future, how can I help but judge you by how gracefully you brush aside the fallen leaves, or how selflessly you turn to me and remove one clinging to the small of my back? This poem is called Generations. Someday when you have grown tall, you will find that I've grown small. And so many of your friends will abide by rules that I've long forgotten, that you will think I am doddering and unmoored, like a flibbertigibbet gibbet of crumpled paper as the wind toys with it, pushing it in decrepit zigzags across the sidewalk. And it's true that I no longer find solace in the lights and din of the carnival. I'm standing so far away that it is a mere gaudery, colored lights from which emerges a child crying and bleeding for its mother. I'm trying to cross the sand to help the child, but as I reach the apex of the next dune, I find myself on another shore. I can see only sand and ocean and a distant kayak in which you labor against a swell that pushes you back with each paddle forward. I call out to you, but you can't hear me. And in any case, what can I do to help? You wouldn't listen to my advice anyway. Stop paddling. Go back. What you were told was wrong. Everything doesn't lie ahead. Everything is behind. I exist to tell you so. I haven't mentioned this in public before, but the following poem contains what I consider an open variable. That is, there's a phrase that changes depending on outside factors. That is, it names the most distant object in the universe, and that changes, of course, if a new distant object is discovered. And since my book was published in 2021, a new space telescope came online, and it's been rectified 4 times since then. So I've changed the name of the one in my book to the new object, and luckily the scientists usually name them with simple letters and numbers. This one's called HD1. This poem is called On the Superior Intelligence of Others. They look at you, the gods, knowing what you think before you do. And like a god, you mustn't show your ignorance. Be perceptive, because what matters is what you know, that you know the names of songs that are stars. They see into the ancient tablet of melody it hums. They see into the lens the red-shifted implication. They would interpret your blank stare as they look at you, knowing that you don't know what you don't know before you can learn it. They know the patterns of social recognition, the embattled aspiration of your natural narcissism towards furtiveness or denial, as if what matters is that I know the names of songs or stars. True, the facts matter less than the larger picture, even if the larger picture is a refuge to which you withdraw, as into a dark cave without shadows, far from the eyes of those who look at you, knowing you before you do. The gods would strike you down for your ignorance, however culpable, however aleatory, because everything you don't know is evidence of disbelief, the narrowness that ignores the origins of songs and stars. I'm not smarter than you. How can you judge such things? You know things I don't know, and vice versa. They're as insecure as you, the solipsists who stare like false idols, minding prescience of what you think and do, lisping arcana, Ugarit tablet, HD1, to belittle your songs and stars. Of course, actually, there's a second variable in that poem, which is the oldest song, which hasn't changed in my lifetime. It's still the Hurrian hymns on the Ugarit tablet, which I mentioned, that if archaeologists ever discover a new one, I would call it to change that in the poem. And finally, I'd like to close with a poem that arose out of my inability to understand certain forms of nostalgia for certain forms of cultural nostalgia, like the kind that people have for pre-civil rights era 1950s. This poem's called Darker. Darker. There was a time that was easeful to the mind. You didn't have to think. You just did or were. You got on a train, and there you were. You went to work, and there you were. The architecture of the building was yours, and the boss may have been exigent, but he was yours. Certainly the neighbors were yours, and the newspapers were filled with you. If you liked art and books, they were always yours. If you liked sports, the players and the coaches and the rules were nothing but you at your golden vest. If you were thoughtless, you could sit in an easy chair, knowing the TV would smile its Gorgon smile, and just scourge images of you and you and you. And your wife, who else could she be but yours? In every turn of her apron, in every turn of her duster on the banister, in every pliant turn in bed. Thought is the enemy, or the thought that represses the thought. To be self-conscious, to go through life assessing each habit, phrase, way of looking, to know that the neutral expression on your face will always be misconstrued as scornful or insufficiently respectful, to avoid being the other in the room, to avoid saying the one thing that surrounds you in a fetid cloud of loathing, to have to think not to think. Look at your hand. Isn't it changing from all the repression? Look at your face. that isn't a 5 o'clock shadow, but something deeper and more permanent. Something, dare I say it, darker, darker. Something you can never scrub off. Thank you.
Please a round of applause for three authors tonight. Thank you. It's good to know more of your work and welcome you back to the space. We welcome you for the first time. And to see so many familiar faces as well. Thank you all for coming. And to those who also are a bit unfamiliar, we offer memberships if you'd like to support the space and support our mission in giving a platform to authors and artists. Please consider becoming a member. We also have copies of their books, as you know, and we also have a few drinks and snacks outside. So please enjoy, and hope to see you again. Thank you.